they are being paid part of the money. But what they usually do is that instead of
give your suggestions as well. And we're looking at key highlights of the 2019 budget statement. And the finance minister on Thursday presented the 2019 budget statement. And with the detail of total revenue and grants expected for the 2019 fiscal year is 58.9 billion Ghana cedis, representing 17.1% of the rebased gross domestic product. GDP. Now, the projected expenditure for that year, including the clearance of arrears, would amount to 73.4 billion Ghana cedis, being 21.3% of the GDP. Now, some of these the words and some of these figures needs more explanation, needs more understanding by a lot of people out there. So we're going to dissect and really digest it to the bottom for you to really understand some of these terminologies and some of these things that are happening within our country. And in the studio to help us with this beautiful, nice discussion, we have the one and only Dr. Ebenezer Ashley. He's a chartered economist, a financial consultant, and he's just here to deliver what he does best. Doc, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
By His grace.
Okay, how was your weekend?
Not bad. You know, been running here and trying to provide some explanation in the name of hoping to build our mother Ghana, and that's the most important thing. So we thank God.
Yeah, and then we follow your discussions and all that. So let's go straight to the very first. So we just want to scratching the surface.
Okay.
Tell us, give us an insight of the 2019 budget.
Thank you very much. First, I'll say good morning to your cherished viewers. I'm sure you're asking for some highlights or summary of it. Yes, the budget is a continuum. In other words, it's a continuation of what actually was implemented not only this year, but the previous year and the earlier years as well. And what normally happens is this: if a particular set of projects is put in place for a given year, and perhaps due to one reason or the other, the nation is unable to carry out all those projects to a logical conclusion, what normally happens is that the outstanding projects will be rolled over to the following year, and new ones added to make up for the full complement of expected projects for a given year. So if for one reason or the other, citizens had the finance minister make mention of certain projects in 2019, which they might have heard even as far back as 2016, 2017, 2018. It shouldn't come as a surprise, because as we rightly mentioned, the name speaks for itself. It is a budget. That means it is an estimation of what you expect to rake in and what you expect to expend. And therefore, the realities, the real happenings of the year would either make your expectation come to full fruition, or there may be some excesses. And when this happens, then you have to roll it forward. Now, what this basically means is that the budget is actually highlighting what the government expects to continue with regards to the previous year, this year as well. And you look at the whole presentation, and it could be spread into 6 thematic areas, which have been described as 6 pillars. You look at the first one, the focus is on infrastructure, which perhaps you may
we're going to go into that.
And there is a reason for that. And then the second one is modernization of agriculture, which is very important. We have earlier on previous times held the view and that the large number of people in the agricultural sector would help us increase production, but that is not the case. If you look at the case of the United States, where it has an estimated population of 350 million, with less than 3% being farmers, and yet this less than 3% is able to produce to feed the entire nation and even have excess for export. What it tells us is that we require massive investment in agri, but not large number of people. So we could have large number of people with less return, as we've been experiencing in earlier years, because of our subsistent nature of farming. We need to move to the mechanized or the commercial form of farming. Now the third one is around industrialization, which is pivoted around the one district one factory concept, and that is also expected to roll out in full force. The fourth one is entrepreneurial spirit. Entrepreneurship is also taking the center stage. We've always mentioned that if you want to very soon have the likes of Warren Buffett, the Bill Gates, the Dangotes, in addition to the Kwame Despites we have, then we should be able to encourage the youth of today. And that is why I've always been talking about changing our form of lending from the collateral-based lending to the performance-based lending. You know, the government is trying to set this in motion. While the various financial institutions are given the opportunity to first meet the minimum capital requirement and then roll out the performance-based lending, which would be in place. As they struggle to meet the minimum capital, if you should also push the performance-based lending onto them, that will be a double jeopardy. You know, so the entrepreneurship is the fourth strong area. The fifth one has to do with improving the efficiency in the mobilization of revenue in the country, and also protecting the public purse. You know, that is very, very important. We've identified as a nation some loopholes in the revenue mobilization process, and how do we plug these loopholes to ensure that quite a large volume of water stays in the barrel and not flow underneath. Now, the sixth one has to do with the social intervention, which we are all aware of. The major one is the free senior high school, and also consolidating the gains we've made with regards to the restoration of the National Health Insurance Scheme. These are two strong areas. You also realize the livelihood empowerment against poverty program, the LEAP, which actually started under Father Kufuor, continued under the previous administration. It reminds me of Nana Oye. Good morning to you, Nana, if you're watching. I think she was able to do a very wonderful job in that area, and it's been continued. Now, the process as it is very good, which has to do with not maintaining people in that category, but it is a means to an end. What it basically means is that the funds will be provided for the needy over time, and then they will be helped to be able to engage in some trade in one way or the other, so that they would be able to move or migrate from the livelihood empowerment program into a mainstream self-sustaining activity. And so these are the key areas that the budget actually touch on.
Now I'll be moving to the agric and the industrial and the domestic area. But quickly before that, why do we normally have a rollover of because if we know we can't meet up all the in a certain year, why do we state them in a yearly budget for us to roll over into another year?
It reminds me of the popular cliche which says, man proposes, God disposes. And as the name connotes, it's a budget. And it's something, it's as if you throw in a stone ahead of you and you running to catch up with it. Your determination.
So it's a proposed and a projected thing.
Absolutely, that is what it is. And as you throw the stone ahead of you, your determination is to run and get to it. But in the course of running, you don't know what might prevent you from actually getting to the destination, or the timed nature of your movement might exceed what you have planned. For example, within 20 seconds you want to get to the stone, but it may take you 30 seconds or sometimes 10 seconds. That is what it is. And so the budget actually captures the expectations of the nation in a year. Now, how do you expect to put or mobilize revenue? These are the existing sources. Those sources are secured. However, there are some sources that are quite challenging. What do you intend to do? We intend to use strategies A, B, C, D to bring them on shore in terms of revenue mobilization. How much do we expect as a nation to get from these sources, these revised or newly found sources in a month? So you look at the month and multiply by the year, and you can estimate that I'll be able to get this much in addition to what I've already been getting. Well, then if my revenue would shoot up this much, why don't I also revise the number of activities or projects in the country? Because because every ministry submits projects to the finance ministry for implementation. And so what we hear is actually not the full complement of projects that are supposed to be carried out in the year. However, if you look at the number of projects and the expected revenue, then you must cut down some of these projects into reasonable means. And also, once again, you realize, yes, in the course of the year, if you are able to get more money than you expect, then it may even be easier for you to bring on board some of the projects you have retired in the year on board. And if the revenue mobilization becomes quite challenging, then it also stands to reason, if you do not want to stretch the gap between revenue and expenditure, then you may have to also retire some of the projects you intend to carry in the year.
So it's like a wheel grinding.
That is what it is. That is what it is. So if it goes smoothly, hallelujah. If it doesn't, then you must revise the notes.
All right, now let's go into details here, where we have now the agricultural sector to grow by 7.3%.
Yes.
Now the industrial sector to grow by 9.7%.
Yes.
Services sector to grow by 6.1%.
Yes.
And gross domestic product to grow 7.6%.
Yes.
Now, what do you make of these sectors?
Well, thank you very much. If you look at the projections, they are not out of place. For this year, because we rebased the economy, and quite a large number of unincluded activities have now been included. You realize we've expanded.
For the ordinary citizen watching, when we say rebase, what does it mean?
Very good. Thank you very much. What it basically means is this. It means we have a particular set of items that we put together to determine the nation's total gross domestic product, for the year. Now, when we say the gross domestic product, it moves beyond what the government herself was able to mobilize directly for the nation, to include the activities of our sellers in the market, our sellers in various places, those companies that also operate in the country. How much profit did they declare? How much total revenue did they record in the first place? So you look at the various activities and then put them together. In some cases, we overlook some economically important activities that we think they are not important. A simple example is the activity of scrap dealers. In time past, we might not be including their earnings in our total GDP. And yet people engaging in this vocation are able to not only make two ends meet in terms of their personal livelihood, but they are able to meet the needs of their dependents. So if you observe carefully and you realize the volume of trade in this particular area and the corresponding amount of money that is churned out by citizens in this area is quite significant, then you must add it to the pool of components that determine our total GDP. So the total GDP does not necessarily mean the total amount of money that is in the government coffers, but it speaks volume of the quantifiable amount of total.
Can we say collective?
Exactly, in the whole country. That is what it is. So if we say rebase, it means those activities that hitherto we were not considering as relevant and important, we now do what? Add them. Now, in the next 5 years, we shouldn't be surprised if the GDP is rebased again, because now we have some people who engage in the collection of the synthetic products, like the plastic waste, and it is a type of business that is now gaining roots, and therefore, if its proceeds are currently not added to the total GDP, it is no surprising. However, in the next 5 years, the individuals who have taken it upon themselves to see this as a vocation or as a business will be able to make significant inroads, and the expansion of the GDP to include the activities of these plastic waste collectors will be in place. So whenever we rebase, it means there are some activities that hitherto we did not consider as financially significant, but now we have realized that people are making ends meet out of those activities, and therefore we need to officially recognize them as being very useful.
Because I know, for example, I know a lady who exports charcoal, and you wouldn't think she'll make money, but she's making a lot of money from there.
Exactly. So in this case, you may think, well, if we're talking about export, then we should be looking at the gold, the diamond, the bauxite, the manganese, but with little emphasis on charcoal. To some extent, you may look at the agricultural sector with less emphasis on charcoal, but look at the smoked and the canned fish and what have you. But here's the case: the charcoal is also a very strong business venture. So if in time past we were not including the activities of charcoal export as determination of our total GDP, then it's about time we do that.
I like the way you've broken it down. I really like that. Okay. Now let's go to the next bit. We're looking at now. We want you to explain this to the viewer out there, to the bottom level. Okay. Now let's start with the estimated total expenditure, which is 73.4 billion Ghana cedi. Can you give us understanding to this?
Yes, thank you very much. You realize quite a number of projects have been rolled out. As we mentioned, the 6 pillars that the finance minister.
All right, let me not cut this. Sorry to cut your thoughts. Let me lump it up. Now we have estimated total expenditure of 73.4 billion Ghana cedis. We have estimated total domestic revenue and grants of 58.9 billion Ghana cedis. We have estimated budget deficit of 14.5 billion Ghana cedis and projected petroleum revenue of 5.4 billion Ghana cedis.
So how do we mean by all this?
What does it mean?
Technical terms, right? Thank you very much. So the expenditure, as we all know, has to do with all the amount that the nation expects to spend on various activities in the country. Now the activities would include...
So yet to spend.
Exactly, not yet spent. Yet to spend in the coming year. You know, so they include payment of those arrears that are due for payment. You know, we know governance is a continuum, and therefore if preceding governments have contracted loans and the payments are due under your care or administration, it behooves you to mobilize the necessary funds and then pay. So as we speak, next year, after reviewing the financial records of the nation, what did we find? We found that next year, X amount of money is due for payment. Now, in interest payments alone, we have about 18.6 billion Ghana cedis. That will have to be paid in interest payment.
That's only interest payment.
Only interest payment. It is 18.6 billion. And for the capital expenditure, that is the construction of roads and other facilities, we're looking to spend about 8.5 billion Ghana cedis. Now, what is quite refreshing from economic and financial point of view with regards to the interest payment expenditure is that about 14.5 billion out of the 18.6 will be paid by the government to local financial institutions. So it means we would technically have about 14.5 billion Ghana cedis being injected into the economy by the government, you know, at various points in the year. I say at various points because it is very likely that the payment will not be made at once by the government. It will be spread over a given period of time. But the refreshing news is that the banks stand to shore up their financial base or their capital base with at least 14.5 billion out of it. And so you look at this particular scenario, and other payments in terms of salaries by the government would also come into effect here. And the social intervention programs, that is the free senior high school for next year, how many students do we have in Form 3 now that are due for graduation next year? They would be absorbed into the system. How much provision have we made for the tertiary institutions in terms of government subvention? All of this would also come into play. So if you look at the various amounts that the government would have to spend in the coming year, this is what has been estimated at the 73.4 billion Ghana cedi. Now, you want to expend that much. Ideally, you should have corresponding amount of money to pay for, so that if for nothing at all you break even, it becomes a zero. But in most cases, it is not possible, even in advanced economies. The only time you have such an equilibrium is when you want to reduce the number of activities in the country. Now, you realize the 58.9 billion you mentioned, that is the total amount of money government expects to mobilize, especially from within, and also through the grant that is expected to be received from now development partners. Few years ago, we used to have donor partners. Now we have development partners. Okay. What does that tell you? It speaks volume of Ghana's migration from a mere developing economy to the lower middle income economy status. And that is what is actually happening here. Now the amount of grant has reduced considerably from 40% to 3.967% in 2016 to 3.335% last year. Now if you look at the total amount you mentioned, 58.9 billion, it is only 1.1 billion Ghana cedis that is expected to come in at various intervals as grants to the nation. Okay. So if you want to determine the 1.1 billion as a percentage of the 58.9 billion, it translates into 1.87%. That is even about, because you've rounded the second decimal place number. So 1.87%. Again, what does that tell you? It means the donor support to the budget is gradually disappearing. Okay. It has already faded, but it is now disappearing. Yeah. So from 3 to 1.87, you can just imagine. So you realize the fourth element that used to hang around and wait to be called upon has now become the dominant third element to Ghana, which has to do with borrowing. Yeah. So after the tax mobilization, the proceeds from export, you will now have to bring in borrowing to complement the efforts of the preceding two elements. And that's exactly what is happening. So the 58.9 billion basically refers to the total amount of money the government expects to put together to help provide all the social and infrastructural, institutional facilities that we have talked about. Okay. Now you realize the 58.9 billion falls short of 73.4 billion by 14.5 billion Ghana cedis. And it is actually a budget deficit. Okay. But because we've had a budget deficit successively for over 4, 5, 6 years, it translates into fiscal deficit. So a country has a fiscal deficit if it records budget deficit for 2, 3, 4, 5 or more consecutive terms. Okay. And that's why we mentioned that the fiscal deficit.
So now let me ask you this. So in the way that we're having grants kind of fade away,
yes.
Can we get to a point where borrowing will also fade away?
Borrowing, I must admit, may not, I did not say cannot. I said may not fade away until the second coming of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Because if you look
so that is a fact.
It's a fact. If you look at advanced economies, they thrive on borrowing. As I've mentioned time and
so why is that in these our parts will make it look as if it's a crime?
You see, the crime aspect of it is subjective. And to some extent, people have a cause to lament on the borrowing in our part of the world because of the findings. You know, you go to the advanced economies, they borrow in excess of what they even generate as GDP, not in excess of their revenue per se, even in excess of the GDP. Look at the United States, 105.40% for just last year. The GDP for US was over $20 trillion US, and it borrowed over $21 trillion US last year, and yet no one is crying wolf. All right, rather, U.S. government, Father Trump is being urged to borrow more or risk being downgraded. Yeah. And so in our case, our problem has to do with effective and efficient utilization of the funds we contract. Okay. And, you know, that is the bane of Africa, not only Ghana. Okay. And that is what this country is trying to correct, so that we will not see borrowing as a nemesis, but then as a means to an effective socioeconomic end. Okay. And that is where we head into. So borrowing in itself is not bad. Okay. But it becomes worrying if we are told an amount of money has been borrowed to put up, say, the Temamoto Way, and the estimated number of years lapses, and we cannot see the road constructed. The money too cannot be accounted for.
But a few minutes ago, you mentioned that.
Yes.
Like what the budget is.
Yes.
You could project.
Yeah.
But then maybe I want to get to this bottle in the next 3 seconds. But something happens and I can't get in 3 seconds. I get it like in 7 seconds. Exactly. So is that not how borrowing looks like? So I've said I'm using it for this, but I don't get to use it for this because of A, B, C. Do we give reasons why we don't meet those borrowing targets?
In some cases, it is not out of place to have an original intention reviewed for a positive purpose. But if you have original intention reviewed for a negative purpose, then it becomes worrying. How do I mean? You want to go in for the loan, as you spelled out, to put up the new roads, construct new roads, make sure the feeder roads in our various areas are in a way upgraded to class 1 road or asphalt road and what have you. Now you go in for the loan, you realize there are some pressing commitments in other parts of the country which require immediate financial assistance. That money is not forthcoming. So you may decide to divert part of the funds or all of the funds intended for the road construction into that area. When you do that, you've still been able to meet some economic demands of the nation. So it is not bad idea. But if the money comes in and the intended project is not carried out, and the money is not used for an alternative national project, but it finds its way into the pockets of few, that is where there is a challenge. That's exactly the bane of Africa. And that is what, as Africans, we have to correct. And the country, Ghana, is taking the lead to make sure that the loans we are contracting will be effectively accounted for. And therefore, when people see that you've gone in for this much to construct that, this and that, then they will have no cause to worry.
So let's move to the next block. Now, the next block of my pointers is that now 16 billion Ghana cedi allocated to pay interest. Now, review of personal income tax band from 10,000 Ghana cedi to 20,000 and above. Now, a bill to Parliament to ensure fiscal deficit is capped at 5% of GDP, and then institute a fiscal council to help strengthen fiscal management.
Thank you very much. The first one, which is the 16, the conflicting figures in the budget itself. At a point,
why would they be conflicting?
Sometimes it's a write-up, and that could happen. You realize the interest payment is 18.6 billion, and I think in some section it's mentioned as 16 billion. So the reporter decided to perhaps pick the 16, but it's actually 18.6 billion, which makes provision for 14.5 billion to be paid domestically, and then the remaining balance of 4.1 will be paid internationally. So that is basically what is actually happening. So that has to do with the interest payment, as we've already explained. And then the next point you mentioned touched on the
review of personal income tax.
Yes, that
10,000 to 20,000.
I think I came to illustrate the newly introduced taxes in July here, and subsequently I did mention that these taxes were introduced strategically as you find yourself in a competitive football match. The first half has ended. There are no clear signs of victory. So as a coach, what do? You'd have to revise your strategy and make sure you introduce fresh limbs that would help you carry the day. And so some of the taxes that were introduced at the mid-term were not intended to necessarily carry forward into the following year, but they were intended to help address some financial challenges of the current year. And it comes as no surprise that indeed the 35% tax that was imposed on earnings of 10,000 or more has first been reduced to 30% and has also been revised from 10,000 to 20,000 or more. So it means it will help those who make up to 19,999 have some side of financial relief and have extra funds available for other commitments. So that is exactly what it means. It means if you were initially in that bracket because you were earning 10,000 or even you were earning 19,999, you would now be left off the hook. And even those who would still remain may not be paying the 35 they were used to at the midterm, but then they will now be reduced to 30%, so that you will still be able to have some little amount of cost savings.
But how many people on a percentage are within that 20,000?
There you go. So if the number is...
So how much are you going to make there?
You see, this is the interesting aspect of it. It is just like a parent with many children. One child comes to you with a problem and leaves. expecting that everything will be solved. The other child comes. So you, the parent, may be receiving barrage or myriad of what? Problems. Yes. But to the individual child of yours, that is enough. And you must meet everything. And so from this angle, it may be difficult for you to fathom that there are quite a number of people in the country who earn more than 20,000. But if you are to find yourself first in the controller's office and second in the Ministry of Finance office, and you see on a monthly basis the detailed salary printout that is presented, you would be able to appreciate the dynamics of these savings.
That's
so from this angle, it will be difficult. But if you are to see the list, you would quickly jump to conclusion and see that some amount of financial mobilization is taking place.
Now let's go to the bill to Parliament to ensure fiscal deficit, which is capped at 5% of GDP.
Yes, what this basically means is consolidating the, I would say, the technical gains we've made from our stint with the IMF. You know, one of the major recommendations of the IMF is to make sure we regulate the level of expenditure. The gap between revenue and expenditure shouldn't be too wide. And that is exactly what, as a nation, we're trying to sustain, because it is in place. It should not be a matter of perhaps in the year of election, the gap will be extremely wide and later difficult to catch up with. And therefore, finding yourself...
But currently, it's not wide?
No, it's not comparatively, it is not. Comparatively, it is not. If you look at it in relative terms, especially with the revenue, you might think it's what, but if you measure it in relation to our GDP, the GDP, it is estimated to be somewhere around 57.4%. You know, for next year, our debt to GDP ratio is expected to be about 57.4%. Now, even this will include the expenditure and outstanding debts. You know, so it is. You want to ask a question before I conclude with this?
Conclude this one briefly.
Yes. So if you look at it, what it basically means is this: as a nation, we're trying to pinch ourselves not to expand. And that is exactly the situation here. So if there's this fiscal council, it will always...
I'll come to that. So what's the fiscal council?
Basically what it means our expenditure with regards to the provision of roads, infrastructure, the social facilities, investing in agriculture, investing in trade and industry.
So is it like a body?
That is what it is. It means people who would always would periodically meet to brainstorm.
But this one, don't we have people in the finance ministry? They have agencies. Can we get people in there to handle? Are those persons who are going to do that?
The ministry may have person or persons, but they may be limited in terms of exposure and in terms of their commitment. They may be acting at a point in time. But then if you have the council, it will draw from the expertise of not only the ministry, but then people from academia, from the professional world.
But Doc, we have a lot of these councils, and truly we don't really see the impact.
The impact. The council, with regards to the fiscal council, we do not have as a nation. We always draw on the expectations and expertise of people within the finance ministry to tell us exactly what projects to be carried out. But when there's this council in place, it will actually complement the efforts of the various ministries. This council would identify the various projects we want to embark on in the nation and be able to recommend same to the finance.
So, you think that's a good start?
Yes. Indirectly, this may be performing the function of the Development Planning Commission. It may be very similar in function, you know, and what it may do would be to guide us with regards to matching our revenues against our expenditure. And if you look at the 5% range, it is not out of place. As we speak, to join the use of the common West African currency, ECO, we need the budget deficit of at most 3%. And for next year, it has been capped at 4.2%, which is in excess of the 3%. But upon the second thought, I realize it is in place. I've always maintained that it is good to end the year, you know, with a favorable variance than to end with an unfavorable variance. So if you project your budget deficit at 4.2, and per adventure you're able to cut it down to 3%, then you may be hailed to have performed better. If you say 3.0 or 2.5 and you're not able to meet it, then your opponents might be castigating you.
All right. Now let's go to Doc. Let's go to the next my next 4 pointers. It has to do with infrastructure and all that. Now, phase 2 of the University of Ghana Medical Center, we've been told, will start in 2019 with a $50 million loan. Second, infrastructure development with $2 billion Sino hydro facility. Then the dualization of the Accra Takoradi and Accra Kumasi highways, and a bill to set up the Ghana Asset Management Corporation for effective management of infrastructure. That one, I really would ask you some questions on that. But let's go to the $50 million, the Sino Hydro, the Takoradi Accra. We always mention that, and it keeps on reflecting.
It's very good. I think I've explained that. But if you look at the first, the Legon medical facility, it is quite refreshing as a nation to have this. And you realize, at least within the West African sub-region, it will be making significant inroads. And on the continent, there are many people who...
Adding to your submission, I want to ask you, why do we quote some of these things in dollars? Is it because it's a foreign aid? But we're going to use it to work in Ghana, so why don't we convert it into cedis?
Thank you very much. It is a loan facility you want to contract. With a foreign body, and therefore you need to state the amount as it is, not only for your administration but for subsequent ones, so that you may not be taken on as quoting a wrong figure. If it is coming in pounds, you must state it as it is. However, when you receive and you want to disburse, that is when you convert into the local currency. So because it is a loan and it is not being generated from within and it is from without, it suffices to state the amount as it is, and therefore this will help you to clear any financial ambiguity that may be arising thereof. And so that is by way of that. The next one, the $2 billion Sino Hydro, that is to go into the infrastructural facilities, and that is why you have catalog of infrastructural projects outlined in the budget. It is the way to go. It is not only intended to improve on our infrastructural facilities in the real sector, but it is also intended to create jobs for many people whom have called in through phone in and what have you personally to say you tout the economic achievements of the government, and yet you don't feel the achievement in our pocket. You also share in the sentiment, right? Yes, you realize most of our people are those who engage in the artisan trade, and therefore they only begin to appreciate what you do if they have a positive feel in terms of engagement. If they are not engaged, they presume nothing is working in the country, and that is exactly what will be addressed in the coming year. And when the concerns of the artisans are addressed through the provision of jobs, through the construction of more roads, more schools, more health facilities, you realize it will have a spiral economic effect on everyone. Their dependents would also come in, and the sellers in the market would also be selling more than necessary, and therefore it will be very useful to everyone. So the $2 billion infrastructure project is in place, and there is also $1 billion being injected into industrialization, and the Accra Kumasi dual.
Why does it keep on reflecting?
Yes, that is what I mentioned. That is the beauty of a budget. When you state it and the amount of money is not enough to complete the project, perhaps what you have will complete a section or a portion of it. So you announce it. When that is exhausted, the following year you also announce the amount of money you have to continue until it is completed. And that
but it's been mentioned before, and it's there and it's not completed. We still know it's on the table.
Yes, that's what I mean. It is not complete because it is relatively huge project, and it means the amount of money that the nation receives is not enough to complete it at once. It may require some amount of phases to carry it through, and that is the problem we have. So the Accra Kumasi Road, as a matter of fact, is over 10 years. since it began. And it is about time we are able to carry it out. You get to a particular point, it is dual, and then you have to, in a way,
merge into one lane,
and if you're not careful, you may just go and hit a snag, because of the nature of it.
So let's look at this one too. The bill to set up the Ghana Asset Management Corporation, is it necessary?
To a very large extent. We have
the housing corporation, we have the ministry for, so how do you juxtapose with this one?
Yeah, the housing corporation, now Housing Company Limited, not necessarily to manage the nation's assets, but to help with the provision of infrastructure, certain forms of infrastructure for the nation. That is what it is. And now, you realize all the various governments tend to have some individuals that are appointed to be in charge of the nation's assets.
I think the former government had something like that.
Yes, had someone who was in charge of the state assets. And you ask, how effective is this particular section? It might be a matter of trial and error, or just working with some figures and information available.
If we didn't see it really working with some parts government, how sure are we that it's going to work?
It did not work because perhaps it did not have constitutional backing per se, and therefore the setup is not as effective as it should be, and it's also having a negative effect on its output in terms of effectively cataloging the nation's assets, and therefore if it is properly constituted and given some strong national legal backing, it will be easier for us to take stock of the nation's assets and be able to tell throughout the country, the nook and cranny, where we have perhaps X number of story buildings, out of the X number, Z number being 4-story, 2-story, 1-story, all of this will be able to have. And when you to assume office, it will be easier for you to know the state assets in place to work with, the number to add to, and even when it comes to vehicles and what have you, what you already have, what not to worry yourself about.
So we just pray that when it comes out, it will become be a double white elephant. All right. Now let me take the last block before we close up. Now we have $3 billion sovereign bonds to be issued in 2019 for critical infrastructure projects. And that falls under projects. You've mentioned that. Now let's go to Office of the Special Prosecutor gets 180 million Ghana cedi for operation. And I keep on asking, how do we know whether this money is enough? It won't be enough, and all that. Now then we have tax exemption regime to be reformed. I want you to break that one out. And then 200,000 jobs to be created through e-waste management program. How feasible is this? And then $2.3 billion of foreign direct investment is expected, and these are expectations. And then national fundraiser for National Cathedral. That is another debatable one.
It's a debatable one.
There's going to be some seed money for that, we've heard.
Yes. But what it means...
But we thought government was only providing space or something for that.
Yes, what it means is that if you have assistance coming in, how much is it? If the government provides seed money, how much would that money complement the external donation that you would get? Now, if there are churches in the country, there are individuals who are committed to this cause, I would like to make a modest contribution to it. Why not? So that is perhaps the basis for this submission. You remember last year, the suggestion was also made by the government through the finance minister for those interested in contributing to the free SHS to do so through a fund. There were people who stood against it, and yet we have another body coming up to say some people should be allowed to make payment. It's quite an interesting one. And the cathedral will need it. If you consider the fact that the mortal remains of the former UN Secretary General was laid at the Accra International Conference, and it was relatively a small place for such a function. You can tell that we need a place where we could hold befitting funerals and also have national thanksgiving giving service, you know, to let the Creator know that in the midst of our stubbornness, we still acknowledge Him as the author and finisher of whatever we do in this country. And so that makes the cathedral establishment unequivocal to some of us.
And just finally zoom on the 200,000 jobs here.
Yes,
specifically, it did mention
that is quite interesting. It means we're trying to improve on our investment in the e-waste business, and therefore the jobs that are expected are not surprising to some of us. Not only that, you realize the finance ministry also launched the Ghana Commodity Exchange, which is a very good initiative, which will help in selling effectively the millets and the soybeans and what have you have in the country. Now, the market for this will be quite guaranteed. And the jobs that are expected to be created have also been estimated at about 200,000. And that is also very good for us. It will add up to job creation in the area of one district, one factory. And
no, this half time, our time will take up. But then I want you to round up and then you...
So you realize quite a number of activities are expected to be rolled out in the coming year, and it is our prayer that the expectations of government will come to fruition, so that the eventual benefit would inure to the citizenry. Because if the government is able to perform, it is not a credit to the government per se, but it is an economic relief to the citizenry. This is the aspect of it that we shouldn't be perturbed and we shouldn't be worried about, but we should see it as a positive omen that will help build the entire country. The political aspect of it should be reduced considerably, not relegated to the background, because people will try to play politics. But we should have the national edifice as the fulcrum of our discussion. And when we do this, we'll be able to move forward earlier than expected in terms of our socioeconomic journey.
All right, so like Dr. Ebenezer actually said, let's have the national fulcrum of discussion. Let that grind the wheel for us and make Ghana what it has to be. It's been a very, very interesting discussion. We've been talking to Dr. Ebenezer. Actually, he is a chartered economist and a financial consultant. Doc, thank you so much. I mean, you always give us the best return. Thank you very much. All right, so you're still switched on to the Monday edition of the Breakfast Show, and there is still a lot more to come. Don't go anywhere.
Unchangeable God. Unchangeable